Welcome back to Track Talk. Today we'll be doing a game of 18 India. 18 India is a newer published game that departs from the kind of mainstream 1830 rule set in pretty dramatic ways. I think that will be obvious to the viewer basically as soon as we start going into the game, and we will just talk about some of those differences as they become relevant. I will reserve my thoughts about this game in general until the end of the video. So if you're interested in my personal feelings about the game, you can skip ahead to that. But I won't poison the well, so to speak, with that up front. And I will point out that once again, I am still unable to anonymize these games. I'm having trouble uploading cloned or hot seat games to the site. So we have not anonymized the players for this game. Hopefully that's not problematic. So with all that said, let's jump into the game. This game starts very differently than many 18xx's in the sense that you are dealt a hand of random certificates from companies that can eventually be floated. And you will, as one of your first actions in the game, have to select a subset of these certificates to hold on to. The certificates that you discard are not gone forever. You will have the option to draft them in the next step, but the other players will also have access to them. So if you have the good things in your hand, it really behooves you to keep them now. I've played this game a couple of times, and the things that I look for at this stage in the game are one, how many of the certificates do I have? So if I want to be a president of a company, I want to make sure that I have enough of the certificates to secure that presidency. So if I only have one of the certificates, I'm probably going to discard it just because there's no guarantee that I'm going to be able to secure that presidency. If I have two or three certificates of a single company, I'm highly likely to keep those certificates because it's just fate that I basically am going to be able to secure that presidency. The other thing to keep in mind is that these companies, some of them are a little bit different in that they have this guarantee warrant, which means that they are guaranteed to pay out even if you withhold or you otherwise don't have a train, which is quite helpful for your stock value because you will not fall back in those scenarios. And then the final thing to note is that you actually have a little bit more information than what I'm showing you here. You actually can see in the Entities tab what shares are publicly available for later in the game. So you can tell, for instance, that if this player has the EIR shares, he has two of them, there's an EIR share right here. So there's a chance that he may be able to secure that right in the first stock round after this draft process is over. It also will show you here how many shares are in players' hands, how many are in the IPO, and how are in the market. So you can get an idea of how likely you are to be the president using that information. Now, when you're playing in person, it's, I think, in my opinion, a little bit easier to tell this because it's just easier to visually see the colors on the table than it is these tables of shares. But it is possible to have some certainty in terms of which companies you're able to start. I will also point out that these companies all have basically pars assigned to them, or at least most of them do. So you can be locked into a high or low par depending on what you float. So that's something to be aware of. Okay, so with all that introduction aside, Daroj is going to be picking his 6 companies. Then Arcalian is going to pick his 6, Sad Knight will pick 6, Frank will pick 6, and now they have all picked their 6 companies. And unfortunately, as they're picking, we don't get to see that, but we will now see Frank's, what he decided to pick, and I will be able to go through that in player order and show you what they've decided. We are now in the point where all the discarded certificates are now available to be drafted, and the draft occurs in reverse player order for the first phase of the draft, and then after that, it is in standard player order. So Daroj is going to get to pick twice in a row, but Frank is able to counterbalance that by having the first overall pick. So it's a little bit of a balancing. You will also note that all the hands or all the shares that were in players' hands to begin with were regular shares, but now there are presidencies available to be drafted as well. So if we're looking at Frank, he looks to have prioritized the KGF and the PNS companies. The PNS company in particular is a pretty important company because it starts in Lahore. You're going to have to forgive my pronunciations here. I assume that's how it's pronounced, but I actually don't know. And Lahore is one of these variable cities with a $50 value. And it also has a pretty easy time getting into Delhi, which is also a high revenue center. So the runs for the PNS are often quite good, at least in the early game until the map opens up a bit. So he seems to be emphasizing the PNS, may see him take that presidency. He also has the KGF, and the KGF is a much less attractive company. Starts down here, does have access to two of these offboards, but this yellow line here is a gauge change, which will prevent him from running trains outside of this southern portion of the map until later phases of the game. So KGF is not quite as good as the PNS, typically speaking. We'll see what Frank does here. He does indeed take the certificate of the PNS, so he now has 40% of that company in his hand. The other players don't know that for sure, but by the fact that he's taken that president, they do have a little bit of information and probably are expecting him to end up being the president of that company. Sad night. He similarly had 20% of the PNS in his hand, so was also prioritizing that company. Unfortunately for him, he has lost out on the presidency, so he may have to change his plans a little bit. We haven't talked about the privates in this game, and that's because they are quite boring. So they all have some variation of a company name and then the East India Company as their name, and they basically will give you some extra track points or a little bit of revenue. I think one of them gives you a token. Just very underwhelming private abilities. Regardless, he has one in his hand, and we will see what he drafts now. So he has taken the NWR. I'm going to go back for a second just so we can see what the rest of his hand is. And he actually has a single share of the NWR. If we look at the IPO, is there a lot of NWR that will be available soon? It doesn't really look like it. It looks like the next available NWR is buried in the IPO share pool. So a little bit surprised to see him pick that. I guess he didn't have great options. The NWR starts, I actually don't remember. Oh, here in Delhi. So the NWR is the company that synergizes quite well with the PNS. So it is a high yield company and reasonable to take that presidency. The I neglected to look if they were warranty companies, and it looks like the NWR is. We will have to look back at the PNS. I'm not sure if that's the case or not. Anyway, on to the next player, who is a Kellyan, and looking at his hand, he has 2 shares in the NCR and the NWR, so he was preempted by Sad Night in terms of the NWR presidency and is falling back on his second choice company, the NCR. The NCR is also a warrant company, and it is starting, I believe, in the center of the map here. This company is a little bit tenuous in the sense that it is once again bounded by this gauge change marker. So it's not going to be able to run south until at least 3 trains have broken. And it also has to pay cost of this river to get anywhere worthwhile. So that is not the greatest company in most games. The rest of his hand is notable for a Gipper share. The Gipper is a company that can start later in the game and will basically be able to start somewhere on the map that is open and can also get additional tokens if people close their companies, which is a feature of this game. So the Gipper is a little bit more of a later or mid-game play. It also has a unique feature where it has up to 200% of the company that can be bought. So later in the game, other players can contest your presidency and also leech off your revenues, that kind of thing. Finally, we are up to, I went the wrong way, up to Deroge. Deroge has, looks like 2 shares in the EIR and 2 shares in the KGF. EIR starts out here in the east of the country. The east of the map tends to be a little bit less developed, not the most exciting company. And then the DHR, I don't remember where that one starts. That is up here also in the east. So his hand is, by my reckoning, probably the weakest that we've seen so far. Not necessarily through any fault of his own. He may have just been dealt that. But this portion of the map, it does not tend to have the highest revenues, at least early. So he's in a little bit of an interesting spot. We'll see what he decides to do. He takes the KGF presidency, and he now has a second draft available to him. So with the KGF presidency, he has 40% of that company. So it looks like I misread that. He's going to actually be focusing on the KGF, which starts in the south, this company here, which can take advantage of these 2 offboards. He will be drafting a second company, and he takes the presidency of the EIR. So he's kind of taking a mixed approach, has, I believe, 40% of both of those companies at this point. Kellyan is back, and he in the last round took the NCR presidency. There are NCR shares available. We'll see if he continues to prioritize that or if he wants to branch out a little bit. And just as a spoiler, we will continue this for all of the certificates available. So this is going to take a minute. We don't have to really analyze this in the amount of detail that we have been. I just wanted to give an introduction to this process. So Achillean is taking the Gipper, that's that special company we were talking about. Sadnight is taking the NWR share that we were just talking about. That is one of the better companies in the game. Frank is taking the DHR. Let me just look at his hand for a moment. The DHR is not something that he owned before, so everybody just seems to be mostly prioritizing these presidencies since they are extra share density in the future. And the DHR is going to be starting out here in the east, so potentially synergistic with Desroches' EIR, depending if they want to play friendly or not. We are back to Desroches, and he's taken the KGF. That was the company down south that he has telegraphed he's going to be starting. Kellyan, he is drafting a private, the Portuguese private. Again, not the most exciting, just gives you an extra yellow tile. And for those that are unfamiliar with this, you're actually allowed to lay 4 yellow tiles per company starting from the beginning of the game. So a single yellow tile placement really is not all that exciting. There is an interesting rule in this game where the 4 yellow tiles you lay have to be in a single direction. So let's say I was starting in Mumbai, I would have to lay 1, 2, 3, 4. I cannot lay 1, 2, 3, and then 4 this way. So I think that extra private tile lay breaks that rule, which is situationally marginally useful, but really not that exciting. Swadnight is up and takes the president of the MR. Frank is taking the BR and also a president certificate. So there's just one presidency left, the CGR, and Desroches snaps that up. All the presidencies are gone, and we will be just basically mopping up the rest of these normal shares at this point. Achillean, he's taking the NCR. Sadnight, the MR. Frank, just looking at his hand, looks like he's got a bunch of the PNS and then some of the KGF. He will be taking the BR. There's a lot of the BR in the draft right now. If we look at the entities, I have to assume most of this company is available. Yes, so there's only 3 shares in the IPO. Most of it is going to end up in player hands. So that might be a risky start for someone because you would probably have trouble securing a secure presidency. Desroches, he's taking the KGF. Let's just look at his hand. I wish we could look at these after we saw what they drafted, but not the way this works. So he has accumulated quite a large percentage of the KGF right now, sitting at 50%, and after this, we'll have 60%. In this game, you are able to own up to 100% of the company, so he's not locked at this 60%. If he's able to pick up that last 10%, he can certainly go over that. Achillean, he has a lot of the NCR, some of the Gipper and the NWR. He is taking a MR. There were no other shares of the companies that he has been preferring available. Sadnight, he has the NWR, MR, and some PNS, none of which are available, so he's going to be stuck with one of these less desirable companies. He takes the Swedish private, which I think is just some revenue for him. Frank, he has been focusing on the PNS, has 40% of that, and he now takes a KGF. That is the share that I believe Desroches was hoping to get. So bad luck for him. Desroches is taking the EIR. That was one of the companies that he was hoping to start in the East, I think. Achillean, CGR, and at this point we only have 2 companies left, so we don't need to pay too much attention to this. We can just move through this very quickly. Looks like the BR was everybody's preferred company, and then the DHR is just left for everyone to take. So we are officially out of the start of the game, or the distribution of assets at the start of the game, and into our first stock round. Achillean has priority, and he now has the option of buying some of these shares that he has accumulated in his hand. He will be paying the value for them, the IPO value. and we'll be able to then just lay them into his Tableau and basically float a company that way. There are two types of companies, or at least two types of company. There are managed and director companies. So you can just buy normal shares of a company out of your hand or out of the IPO and play them. And as soon as 30% of the company is out, it becomes a managed company. As soon as somebody plays the presidency of the company, it is now a directed company. And the difference between those two companies is kind of subtle, just basically edge cases, as far as I can understand. They basically play the same way. So, in addition to buying shares from his hand, he can also buy shares from the market. And the market is listed on each of these players, or each of these companies' uh, little tables here. Or he can buy two shares from a single row in the IPO. So he could buy the EIR and then the NCR, for instance, or the KGF and the GIPR. Um, and the advantage of that is that you can get a share that is otherwise not in your hand, if it's not in the market. But the danger is that you may be uncovering a valuable share that somebody else wants. So, for instance, if he were to pick up the NCR to get this PNS share, and the PNS is one of those companies we identified as being fairly lucrative, he would be then uncovering the NWR share for Sad Night. So that's the tension in this portion of the game is, there's a little bit of a give and take in terms of exposing other shares to other players. We'll see what he decides to do. It looks like he is planning on running the NCR. Just refreshing our memory, the NCR is starting here in the middle of the map. Is a kind of mediocre start, I would say. Looks like he has bought the director share. So, as noted, the NCR is a directed company and has floated with just the 20% share being played. Otherwise, if he had not played the director share, he would need to play 30% of this company to float it as a managed company. It is incremental cap, so he bought two shares at 90, has $180 in the treasury. The trains are, I believe, $180. So he has exactly enough to buy this first train. But he does need to keep in mind that he's going to have some terrain costs coming up, so he may need to buy at least one more share in order to do what he needs to do. There's also not that many two trains in this game, so if enough companies float or companies float with enough capital and you are late in priority or late in operating order, you may find yourself without a two train, and the three train is quite a bit more expensive at $300, so that can be quite painful. Trains in this game, as an aside, do not rust. So we're never going to see any bankruptcy or forced train buying, but you can certainly still fall behind in terms of revenue if you're running just a measly two train and everybody else is running, a four train or something ridiculous. So there is still a train rush. It's just of a different variety. It's a little bit softer. Regardless, we're kind of getting off topic. The NCR has floated, and we are on to Sad Night. Technically speaking, Achillean could have bought more shares from his hand. So he just bought the director share or the president share for now, but I imagine that we will see him buy additional shares, and he could have done that as his first action. Maybe he just wants to see what the other players are planning. Sad Night, he is also floating a company. It's the MR this time. I don't know that we've talked about this company necessarily. The MR, I don't remember where that starts. Looks like it starts in Chennai. Am I pronouncing that right? You'll have to let me know in a comment. So is separated from the KGF, which is another company I expected we'll see starting. I think Deroge is going to start that one by a gauge change. So even though they are close to one another, at least in the early game when they have two trains, they actually can't run to each other's track, which is a little bit unfortunate. Sad Night is going to stay at just the presidency. Frank is bucking the trend, and instead of buying a share from his hand, is actually going to the IPO. He bought from row three, so he picked up that NCR and now is staring at the PNS share, which I assume he's going to pick up because otherwise, why would he have bought the NCR? The NCR is, again, not the most exciting company here. So he does pick up the PNS, and by virtue of There being a share in the market of the PNS already, he actually only needs to play one more PNS share into active play for this company to float as a managed company. I believe Frank does have the presidency of the PNS. Let's look. He does. So he will have control of this company. And he may just wanted to snag that share from the IPO to guarantee that he had control of that company because he actually only had 40% in his hand. So now he will guarantee to have 50% of that company. On to Deroge, last company to, or last player to operate in this stock round. Deroge has the KGF and the EIR. He has a pretty flexible start, actually. He has a lot of different companies which he could potentially try and finagle a presidency out of. The KGF is a rather low par at only 64, and the EIR is a high par. I think it's the highest you can go at $100. So if he plays his cards right, he may be looking at a dual float. We'll see. He buys the KGF off the IPO. Again, this is a company that he is probably trying to control and just wants to secure the shares that are vulnerable to other players before playing the shares out of his hand, which he's guaranteed to control. So that makes perfect sense. He is the manager of this company as he's the only investor, but this company is not technically floated since 30% has not been bought and no director share has been played. We're back around to Kellyan. He is buying the EIR. So I think that he is doing this from the IPO just to expose a more valuable share. He is the NCR president, and there is an NCR share that he has just uncovered. So I don't imagine that he's actually interested in the EIR. It is an expensive company, and he's already kind of invested a fair amount in the NCR. So he does buy the NCR, has 30% of that company. He did get a little bit of extra help in capitalizing his company from Frank, but again, Frank was in the same position where he was just uncovering a more valuable share. Sad Knight so far has worked on the MR. Looking at the IPO, there is an MR share available under this Skipper certificate. May see him pick that up. Alternatively, has plenty of options in his hand if he would like to take advantage of those. So he buys the NWR. Um, and the NWR does not yet have a presidency. So is he pivoting to the NWR from the MR? Certainly possible. He has 40% of the NWR in his hand, and the NWR is a pretty attractive company. NWR is a warrant company, so that's something to keep in mind. A little bit of a safety blanket there for the president and investors, and then also has good map position. Frank, he's buying the PNS. PNS is what he did last time as well, so no surprises there. He buys that from the market, so once again prioritizing vulnerable shares rather than his protected hand of shares. Deroge, he has played the director share of the KGF, so he's committed to that company. Still has a ton of cash, so we'll see if he wants to just fully capitalize that company. I believe he has a bunch left in his hand. He does another 40%. This could get up to 70% quite easily, or if he wants to spread his cash around. Kellyan buying the NCR, so he is now buying shares from his hand and just fully capitalizing his company. Only $90 left for him, so imagine we'll see him buy another $90 share, probably from his own company, the NCR. And he does, in fact, do that. So this is what I was talking about. He's able to play multiple cards from his hand in a single action, which makes priority in this game a little bit interesting. We will talk about priority soon, but just so you know, it's handled in a unique manner in this game, and part of that is that your stock actions are kind of lumped and allow you to spend a whole lot of money all at once. Sad Knight, he buys an NWR from his hand and is now controlling that company. The company is floated. We'll see if he continues to buy shares there or if he goes back to the MR. Both of those companies have floated. Frank, he has played the director of the PNS up to 40%, and he buys another share of it now up to 50%. Only $80 left for him, so could get one more share of the PNS, but is going to be locked out of these $90 shares, not able to contribute to those. Deroge, ton of cash left still. and he has played a DHR share. That was one of those companies in the East. So he has KGF and DHR, two very low par companies, and is operating quite late in this operating round behind a number of companies that have already floated. So just looking at this now, the NWR, NCR, MR, PNS, four companies are operating before his companies. There are only six trains, and several of these companies have enough money for two trains. So if I'm sitting in Deroge's seat here, I could be a little bit worried that there will be no two trains available if I were to float two companies. And is he going to be able to capitalize these companies um, kind of rich enough to afford three trains in both of them? That might be a tall order. We are seeing Deroge take another action here, and he is buying his private. We're back to Sad Night, has $170, and will buy his private as well from his hand. The privates you buy, and they pay you revenue, and then you can sell them. So the money that you use for a private is not actually lost, but you don't make really a profit on buying them in because you just sell them for face. So these players are just getting a little bit of extra revenue for the early game by making these privates active. Frank is out of the auction, and I think he is the first player to pass. Sorry, Achillean is the first player to pass. So as you can see, he will be first as it stands right now in the next stock round in priority. Frank, having passed, will be going second, and then we'll see which of these players, Sad Knight or Deroge, gets the third spot and fourth spot. Even though these players have passed, in theory, at least in later stock rounds, they could come back in and take valid actions to rejoin the stock round, and that would lose them their priority until they passed again. So this is pass order priority, not left of last action, not most cash, which are some of the other systems we see in other 18xx's. I think it's an interesting system, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. Deroge, he is buying his DHR, so it looks like he is committed to floating two presidencies, and we'll see if the other players are going to let him kind of get away with that, or if they're going to play some hardball and try and push trains. Achillean still passing. Deroge, it looks like he actually bought two shares there, and he's going to be passing third, it looks like. So Sad Knight likely to be going last and probably taking his last actions in the stock round here. He buys the NWR from his hand, and we are into the operating round. So that was a slow start to the game. There's a lot of setup that you do in terms of distribution of the starting player positions and hands of assets, but the game does pick up a little bit moving forward now that that's all been done. The subsequent stock rounds are typically a little bit faster, and the operating rounds are fairly quick. So Achillean is the president of the NCR, this EIR company. He wasn't able to finagle a way to make that float, and it's just a wasted $100 investment. I believe he did that in order to uncover an NCR share, so maybe worthwhile, but there's a little bit of an efficiency cost there. Frank running the PNS. PNS, a great company, well capitalized. He's the sole investor in it, so he's going to be getting all that great revenue, at least in the early game, to himself. And there's only two shares that are available to other players, as far as I remember. I actually don't know where the player hand shares are. He may control those as well. Deroge, two presidencies, kind of the most unique position in the game amongst these players right now, since he has presidencies across the map and is operating late. We'll see how that works out for him. And then the NWR and MR from Sad Night. The NWR is kind of, I guess, the partner to the PNS, partner in crime in that northwest corner, typically a pretty valuable company. And then the MR is kind of on the East Coast in the South, typically not the highest revenue company. All right, we're into the operation, and the NWR will be leading us off. Lays Delhi, and then we'll have three more track lays, which he immediately lays. A couple of things to point out here in our first operating round. First, as we mentioned, four track lays for all the companies, which is kind of insane. I don't know any other game that does that. This map fills up very quickly. Second thing is these triple dits. The triple dits will not upgrade, and dits are free in this game, so they are nice to have on your route. Um, I don't know another game that has triple dits. I just think that's kind of a crazy piece of tile to have in the game. And then the final point, and it's not quite evident here, but you'll see it soon, is that the tiles are totally unlinked from the phase or the trains that are available. So this yellow tile could immediately be upgraded to green, even though no three trains have been bought. There's no progression in the game phase, and that's true all the way up to gray. So if there was a stall and the players just ran two trains for a couple of operating rounds, we could see this tile upgraded to gray, which is something, as far as I know, is unique to 18 India. NWR already running for 20, um, and or sorry, for 50, um, and is now going to be picking up a train. And the reason he has that payout is because it's a warranty company. He didn't actually have a train to run there. So picking up a two train does have the option of picking up a second two train, but if he were to do that, where would he run it to? Would be highly dependent on the track developing in a useful manner that he could run two trains from Delhi to Lahore, basically. The two trains are not able to cross this gauge change, so there's no other city that he would be able to reasonably get to before the next operating round. So probably we'll just see him pause at two trains, sorry, at a single two train, because I don't think he would have the cash to run or the track to run a second train. Now that said, even if he can't run it, if he denies it to another player, he is still, in my mind, getting ahead. So not unreasonable to think about it that way. However, operating first like this, there's no guarantee that the other four trains all get snapped up, and maybe he would just be wasting money to not hurt anybody else. The two trains, and basically any train except for I believe the last leg of trains, can be sold back to the bank for full value. So it's not the end of the world to buy an extra train to deny it to somewhere else. But still, I don't know that we'll see that because he's not going to have a run for it. Okay, so sticking with a single train, in theory, any of these companies can take a stock action at the end of their operating round and buy a share in another company. You see that from time to time, and the reason for that is because another unique feature about 18 India is that company assets, so shares owned by the company, trains owned by the company, privates, all this stuff. Actually, I don't think privates do because they go away. But all the assets of the company get counted towards your final game score as an investor in the company. I think it's 10% of the value of those assets are included in the share value of your company, which is uh, unique and something to consider in terms of investing. In addition to that end game bonus that you get for owning the shares, you of course get the revenue of those shares into the company. So if you have extra cash like the NWR does, we may see him pick up a share in another company. Uh, he does. He picks up a share in the MR, and that is a choice, an interesting choice, I guess. The MR we've been kind of lackluster on. I guess that was the only share that was available to him. That's not true though. He could have picked up the NWR, and the NWR, oh sorry, the NWR is the company. Um, so yes, the MR was basically the only share available. Okay, so I guess he feels better than nothing. NCR, next company to operate, doesn't have a whole lot of options. Probably going to be heading up towards Nepal. Um, there is a track cost associated with that, but otherwise, where is he going to run his trains? So actually bucking my expectations and heading towards Delhi. Um, Unfortunately for him, he's not going to be able to run to Delhi even if it gets upgraded to green because his yellow train or his two train is not going to be able to cross that gauge change. I suppose he's hoping that Delhi gets upgraded, then he can drop a token there, but that seems optimistic. We'll see if that works out for him. NCR buying a single two train, it looks like, and I think there are no shares available. Actually, he can buy the NWR share, which he probably should because that company is going to be paying out a lot. He passes for now. Did he have the cash for it? NCR did have plenty of cash, so a little bit surprised that we see that market share stay available. MR is up. He's operating down south. Unfortunately, this map is so big, I have to scroll away from the player log to see their track. This company, again, is bound by these gauge changes, so may have to run up towards this city just to secure himself a run. We'll see if that's what he decides to do. Looks like it. Um, and this gives a good an opportunity as any to talk about two features of the map that we have neglected to mention so far. First of all, is that these offboards have this interesting notation where it's $50 plus a question mark. So these are variable value cities, which means that they will count for the number that is printed plus the value of the highest city on the run. So if you run a $20 city, your value for the offboard will be increased by 20. When these cities get upgraded later in the phase and they run for $60 or $50, whatever, that value will be what's added to the offboard. Now I will say that at least in the 18xx.games implementation of this game, because we're in alpha, there is an error on the map, and all the values on the offboards are actually $20 less than what is printed. So Chennai is actually only at $30 plus the variable cost. This will probably be fixed soon, I would assume, but for the purposes of this video, just realize that these values are not quite as high as what is printed. The other thing on the map that I will point out is that there are these tokens or markers on the map. This one I believe is gold, and I think this one's ore, cotton, spice, etc. These are commodities, and if they are included in a route and then delivered to a specific offboard, they will give you a bonus to your route. And only one player or only one company can secure that bonus. It's the first company to operate through it. The destinations for these commodities are printed on the board, but they have been neglected in the alpha implementation of this map. So if you were to play this in person, there would be no doubt where you have to deliver those commodities to. It's fixed in the same every game, but at least for now, we don't have that on .games. So I'm sure that will be fixed as well, but for this game and this video, you will just have to take it on faith that when the game tells you the commodity has been delivered, that has been accurately done. MR's operation track laying is done. We'll have a valid run, and again is only going to have a run for a single 2-train, so it just picks up one of those. PNS has a decision, can cooperate with the NWR or can go off on its own and perhaps try and run down to Karakai or just lay tragic track and block the NWR to try and neuter it. Generally speaking, in my plays of this game, I've seen these two companies cooperate just because the revenue potential is so high. It really doesn't make sense to play hardball with your neighbor because it really just benefits you both so much to cooperate. The reason I say that is because you can pick up a lot of dits. The dits are all included in your run for free, and then the 00 tile gets upgraded rather quickly to a really high value, and that gets added to Lahore for really massive runs. So these two companies just have really good early game potential. Regardless, Frank is up, and looks like he is going to be cooperating with the NWR, goes out of his way to incorporate all these dits, and these two companies are going to be running pretty monstrous runs with just a 2-train. Picks up the 2-train, could pick up a second one, and again, this is that tension that I've been kind of expecting, where if he buys a single 2-train here, Desrouge does not have 2 trains for his two companies and could be in a little bit of trouble. I don't remember if either of these companies are warranty companies, so neither of them are, and as a result, one of them would be guaranteed to fall back twice, which is, obviously detrimental to his net worth and prospects in this game. But it looks like he just sits on a single train, and he picks up that NWR share. So kind of surprising to me that it lasted as long as it did. Multiple companies had opportunities to pick that up, and it's going to pay for a ton, and it was just left alone. So DHR operating all of its lonesome in the east of the map. This company is blocked by a gauge change and really has to run to Nepal to have any early game runs. Looks like that's where he's headed, and we'll see where he eventually wants to go after that. Interestingly, in this game, you can double tap 00 cities with a single train if the track allows it. But Nepal and Mumbai, for whatever reason, are exceptions to that. So even if he had a long enough train to run all these stops, it would not be valid for him to hit Nepal twice with a single train, which is pretty bad for the DHR. DHR picks up a 2 train, and we are onto the operation of the final company, the KGF, operating down south here. And he is heading to the offboard and lays towards the DIT. Not going to be able to run this DIT until he gets a run down south or some other type of run to end on a city. You cannot end on the DITs, but he's just setting himself up for later in the game. He buys a 2 train, so all the 2 trains are gone, and we are into. Oh, interesting. So he actually buys a train out of the DHR. So we'll be running 2 trains in the KGF, and it looks like he has exactly 4 track points to lay down to this DIT. So I'm anticipating him running 2 trains from his home city into Kochi, and he should have pretty decent revenue with that. This area of the map is not entirely um, amazing in terms of payouts early in the game compared to the Northwest. But with 2 trains, he's going to be a competitor for some decent revenue there. This does have the downside of course, his DHR continuing to fall back. As mentioned, the companies can close in this game, so maybe that's what he's going for. The DHR, he has a pretty minimal investment in, just 30%. And he's extracted a lot of the value out of that company from those shares. So he will take a hit in terms of his net worth by just letting these shares kind of evaporate. But I suppose that's worthwhile. And actually, this is a managed company, so there is no director of this company. I believe he can just sell these shares in the next stock round without any penalty. So when I was talking about the difference between managed companies and director companies, this is an important distinction. I think he can just sell out and not have to suffer the erosion in his net worth other than the single drop he sustained in the first operating round. So if that's the case, that's a pretty clever move and a nice way to get some extra cash into your company. We are into the second operating round. NWR is up. Expect we'll see him just immediately upgrade Delhi. And he has a couple of different options in terms of how to upgrade here. And it will be interesting to see if he gives the NCR player an easy in towards Delhi. Looks like he is not eager to help his opponent and will be blocking them from Delhi, at least in the this current operating round. He's going to run for a ton here because this $40 value is going to get added to Lahore, and he's going to run for like $200 or something. 160. So quite nice revenue for just a 2 train. Pays it out, and he is able to move forward. Doesn't look like he's doing any stock actions. We're onto the NCR. He's probably a little bit annoyed that he has been blocked from Delhi by the NWR and now has to kind of scramble to find himself a run. So he can upgrade his home, but that won't give him a run. And if he does that, he has no track that he can lay to develop a run. So he could, yeah, he's in trouble. I don't know that there's a valid run for him within 4 track lays. Let's see what he does. He just upgrades his home, and because he's a warranty company, he does not fall back, but he's not actually able to run his train. That is the benefit of having a warranty company, so that's a nice display of that. 3 trains are available. The NWR did not have cash to buy one, but the NCR does. We'll see if he wants to kick that off. Looks like he's going to pass and has no stock actions either. The MR is now up. MR operating down south. Does have 4 track lays available to him, but with just a single 2 train, may want to just upgrade his home, or not his home, the city on his route, which is what he does, and looks like he'll just be running a train. I will say that Desroches has kind of telegraphed that he is going to be running 2 trains, so this player, Sad Knight, could have laid some tragic track for Desroches and forced him to run just a single 2 train. That would have been a little bit mean. Runs for 100 and pays it out. He also does not buy any trains. PNS, we are seeing now the power of these two companies because he's going to upgrade Delhi to brown. Again, we are still technically in just two trains, and we already have brown tiles on the map. And his run's going to be a little bit better than the NWR's because he's able to take advantage of this brown track. He has actually given a little bit of a boon to the NCR with this upgrade, since now the NCR is able to lay into the south here and get a token in Delhi, which is probably what we'll see. Unfortunately, it still doesn't give him a route as a result of this gauge change marker. So depending on how track develops, the NCR, even with a token in Delhi, may not be able to run a train. PNS runs for 180, pretty good revenue, and pays it out. He's selling his two train, which is something we talked about, and he's going to pick up a three. Interesting he does that. I'm not seeing a three run for him just yet, but he obviously has plans for the future. And I guess we can talk about this at the end of the game, but I will point out that he is able to sell his train before he buys a train. So he gets the run from the train, then gets the revenue or the cash from the train, and is able to immediately put it to a new train with no penalty. There's no falling back for running without a train for an OR, which is a interesting strategy in 18 India, and whether or not that's good, I guess is up to the viewer to decide. PNS looks like he's passing. DHR, no train. We'll see if he lays any track or if he's just gonna let this company die. So he does lay some track down to Dhaka and is not gonna be willing to pay the train costs. So just throwing away track, and he falls back without a train, but there is no obligation to have a train in this game, no emergency buying, so no skin off his nose. KJF, now laying track down south. He used his private company to lay a commodity on this tile. That is kind of the most interesting private, I guess. So he has laid the jewelry commodity on this tile, and now the first time that he runs a valid route through that tile and delivers jewelry to any offboard, he will add, I believe it is a $20 bonus to his run. So in addition to having two trains, he will also have a bonus on one of those trains, which I think is going to make his revenue on the level of the PNR and PNS and NWR, which is quite nice for him. I was not expecting him to be able to pull something like this off. So he's laying track down towards that DIT, which will give him a run into Kochi, and he should have pretty good revenue here. Looks like he's running for 160, which I believe is what the NWR ran for, which is, as noted, pretty good. Pays it out, and that is good for a double jump. There are, I believe, even quadruple jumps in this game, which is kind of insane. Definitely triple jumps, and I think they're quadruple. So he's going to double jump, and we are into our stock round. Akelian is leading us off and does not have that much cash, and the other players all have quite a bit more cash than he does. A unique feature of 18 India, which we're about to see, is that all the players in turn order, priority order, have to sell any shares they want, and then we enter the buying phase of the stock round. So it's not buy sell, it's not sell buy. You sell everything you can or want to, and that's the only thing you can do here, and the only time you can sell for the entire stock round. And then we go into buying shares. So we'll see if Akelian wants to sell anything. I imagine he doesn't really want to hold on that EIR, given that it hasn't floated and it's quite expensive. He probably wants to sell that and get some paying shares somewhere else. So I was wrong, and he just passes. Frank, he does sell a share, the NCR. NCR, again, has been a little bit underwhelming in this game. He has gotten some payouts just from the guarantee, but those are pretty pitiful. So selling that because he's not a believer in that company's long-term potential. Daroj, he immediately sells out of the DHR. DHR is now presidentless. I guess it has always been presidentless, but now does not even have a manager and is getting pretty close to closing. So that is a interesting strategy that we will have to keep in mind in the future. That as long as it's not a directed company, you can sell out of this with very little cost. So he had 30% of the company total and lost it looks like $9 of value per share. So just $27 to get himself a two train into his other company. That's pretty good. And then we are on to Sad Knight, who also is actually, so he's in a different situation. So he has a director company, not a managed company. He's not going to be able to sell out of this company, I don't believe. and he instead is just selling his private, or not his private, uh, yes, sorry, his private for a little bit extra cash. So he got one payout or two revenue payouts from this company and then recovers his full investment. So just a net gain of $10 for him. We are into the buying phase of the stock round, and Akelian is immediately buying the Portuguese private from his hand. Could have done this later in the stock round. This is a single extra yellow tile placement, and that will be for the NCR. NCR does desperately need tile lays since they have no run currently, so reasonable to do that. But I will point out that there are potentially contestable shares out here that other players may want. So buying something from your hand is a little bit of a lower priority. That said, he really doesn't have much cash because he's set on this EIR share. So I guess that was really only his only valid action, actually. Um, Looking a little bit rough for this player, I will say. Not loving his position in the game. Regardless, bias is private, and we are on to Frank. Frank is buying the KGF from the draft, and this is Darrow's company. It's, as noted, got pretty darn good revenue, at least right now, so reasonable to snap that up. Similar to what I was saying for Akelian, though, buying a share out of your hand when there are other shares that are potentially contestable by other players may not be the highest yield. So it looks like there are a market share available in the NCR, for instance, that he could have paid for rather than paying for out of his hand. The only downside, or the counterpoint to what I've been saying, is that if you look at the IPO, it's all Gipper shares. So these are quite expensive, and the players may not be willing to open up the IPO by buying one of these to get a share other than out of their hand. So maybe that's why we're seeing everybody going to their hand off the bat. He's actually buying a second KGF. I don't believe he has enough to contest the presidency here, but that would be certainly interesting. So he actually can get up to 30%, but I'm sure that Desroges has shares hidden that he can use to defend. So he does, technically a split presidency, but I think we will see Desroges to be able to defend that. We immediately see that, so he's up to 40%, and he has another 30% that he could buy right off the bat if he wanted to. Looks like he's going to content himself with just 50% for now, and we're on to Sad Night. Sad Night is buying the MR, so just further capitalizing their company, and again going to their draft hand because these Gipper shares are clogging up the IPO. Frank is out, will have priority into the next stock round. Sorry, Akelian is out and will have priority. Frank is quickly following, so first two players have passed. They cannot sell shares, so if they don't have enough cash to buy anything, they will not be able to come back into this stock round. Desroges, plenty of cash for him. Probably going to be going last, if I had to guess, in the next stock round as a result. Buying the EIR, so that's interesting. Akelian bought a share of this in the first stock round, but did nothing with it, and now it looks like Desroges is actually going to potentially float it. So he bought it from the market. There are no other market shares. Does he have anything in his hand that he could buy? He does. So we may well see that. The EIR is the, I guess, sister company you could think of the DHR here on the East, and he has laid a bunch of track for it with the DHR, which he's now abandoned. So maybe he's hoping to take advantage of that track throughout the game with the EIR and float that company. So he's looking like he's going to be a two presidency player for most of this game. Frank and Akelian still passing. Sad Night bought a private. The private is the Dutch, which again is just a extra track upgrade. These privates are really underwhelming. Desroges, now the director of the EIR. So not a managed company like the DHR was. This is a true director company, and he has enough cash for a 3-train in it already. He is going to be the last player to pass, and I don't think anybody has any valid actions, so we're into the operating round. NWR is up. May see a gray upgrade on Delhi here. Let's see. We do. So that is a gift, I guess, to the MR or the NCR The NCR has cash for a token, so should be able to just piggyback off the track that has been laid by the PNS and NWR at this point by laying this track and tokening in Delhi. So that is a breath of fresh air for the NCR, who has been struggling up until now. Looks like they are using their private even in order to get a second track lay, which will allow them to token in K14. K14 can be a choke point on this map because of these gauge changes. So it looks like he's going to take advantage of this to snag this token before the PNS is able to steal it away from him. And he immediately does so. Great. Running for $200, so able to eclipse the run of the KGF last time, despite it running a single train. And we'll see if he's interested in a three train now. Unfortunately for him, the three train still is not going to get him into this other city because of this gauge change. So if he wants a three train, would have to withhold and buy a three train rather than just selling his two train, because a sale of the two train and purchase of the three that way would not be adequate to improve his run. So he does withhold and has just enough for the three train, so we'll be running two trains and it's going to have pretty darn good revenue as a result. No stock actions from him. We're on to the MR. MR operating down south. See what he wants to do. Looks like he is heading to an offboard, and it looks like there is a gauge change in between that, so he's not going to be able to run that with a three train either. But it does open up opportunities to head towards the north of the map, which is what he's looking to do. He does not token in Mumbai. May want to think about that, as it is within range of both the NCR and the NWR, as it's only 3 tracks away. And if he gets tokened out at Mumbai, he may be in for a world of hurt later in the game. So he did not do that, but may come to regret that. Running a 2 train for 100, and he also withholds that. Imagine we'll see him selling his 2 train to pick up a 3 here, and he does. The MR buys his private, and the Swedish private, let's just look at that for a second, is just revenue. So he is going to get a little bit of cash into the company until that goes away. The EIR, first operation for this company, lays his 00 and is running into the DIT, and then running southwest towards another DIT. He does not have a valid run just yet. Not entirely sure where he's going to be going. He's going to need a 3 train to hit this Chennai offboard because of the gauge change. So maybe that's where he's ultimately looking to go. Picks up the 3, and we are on to the NCR. NCR should be tokening in Delhi, and then we'll see what track he's interested in laying. Heading up to Nepal, and just creating a big loop here so that he can use all those dits later in the game. And does token in Delhi, so his run is going to be just as good as the NWRs now. Runs for 200, and actually withholds, so it looks like he'll be picking up a 4 train actually. Again, the 4 trains do not rust the 2s. There is no rusting in this game. And actually, by selling the 2 train, could pick up a 4E. E trains are basically diesels in that they can run unlimited runs, and they ignore gauge changes. So they are going to open up the map for these players basically exponentially. They do have the downside of not picking up the dits, and there are a fair number of dits available to him. So he has to decide whether he wants the 4 or the 4E. He's going to have to sell his 2 train either way. And I will just come back to this fact that you can sell your train before you have to buy one, which really flies in the face of a lot of standard 18xx tropes, which is just really weird to me. So he withholds and does not sell a train. So he's going to be sitting on just a 2 train, doesn't want the 4 trains. PNS, running a 3 train. Going to be forced to token in Delhi. It really cannot afford to lose out on that token. Even though he's safe at K14, nobody's going to be able to token through there for a while. Really should just secure that token right away. He is laying out of Delhi, towards potentially an offboard, maybe looking towards that oil commodity later in the game. And does secure the token in Delhi, runs his 3 train for just 200. Again, because of these gauge changes, is not able to increase his run beyond that of a 2. He's the first player to actually pay out, I believe. I think everybody else has been withholding. Did the NCR pay? No. So yeah, maybe the first payout of the operating round, and we'll see what he wants to do to secure himself a better train. The PNS, let's just look at the investors there. He is the sole investor, so sure, pay it out. Why not? The NWR has a little bit of a split investment from another company, so maybe a little bit less incentivized, especially with only a 30% presidency to pay out than a 60% presidency would be. KGF, been talking about a lot about this company since it's had kind of the most interesting track development, least expected or stereotyped track development. He's upgrading his home and running his 2 trains for 200. So he's been able to keep up with the northwest of the map by virtue of having 2 trains. And he's pretty close to a 4 train. He could sell one of his 2 trains and pick that up, I believe. He's also able to pay out, sells a train, and he grabs the 4E. 4E again is basically a diesel, going to be able to pick up sorry, that's not right. It's not a diesel. It counts the 4 highest revenue centers on its run, and it has an unlimited run, still limited by tokens, of course. So he's not worried about the DITs, and it looks like he's probably going to be running from Kochi up into H25 in the next operating round. Should have a pretty decent run for himself. The KGF is done, and DHR has no president, so it's just going to be falling back. And does it close yet? No, it has one more operation before it closes. Interesting mechanic. The DHR is going to decrease the cert limit for everybody, and I believe it allows the Gipper when it floats to have an extra token. So that's the consequences of a company closing. NWR is up. We'll see where he wants to run track. Probably down here to Mumbai. Doesn't have the cash to token there, which is a little bit unfortunate. But we'll see how he wants to run this train. Does have 2 trains, should have a pretty good revenue as a result. Does run towards Mumbai and running his 2 trains for 370, and he was actually able to pick up this spice commodity, so he's secured that for himself for the rest of the game, which will be a little bit of an extra bonus for him. I think spice is one of the less good commodities. I will look and get back to you. So I just looked on my physical copy at the map, and Spice actually grants him a $40 bonus to his run. So it's actually pretty middle tier in terms of the commodities. Not a bad thing to pick up by any means. And he has secured that for his company for the rest of the game. It's a nice pickup. Does lose out on that token, though, probably. Paying for 370. The revenues are starting to really explode here. And we'll see if he wants to try and get a better train for this 2 in the future. But he's paying that out for now. The MR is up. MR operating down south here. Was playing with fire with this token. We'll see if he snags it now. He is going to link up with the EIR, laying some track that I assume Daroche was going to lay anyways. And he does snag that token in Mumbai. So got, from my perspective, lucky there that it wasn't stolen from him. And running his 3 train for just 130. Unfortunately for him, I think he's going to be falling behind in this game. His revenue is really not up to snuff compared to the other players, and he's going to struggle to afford one of these 4 trains. He's going to have to withhold for it. We're on to the PNS. This player is heading towards that oil commodity as expected. I actually don't know, without looking at my physical copy, where the oil goes, so we'll see if he is able to secure that or not. Running for 310, a little bit worse than the NWR as a result of not having commodity. And is he going to be going for a 4 train? Looks like not. He's content with the status quo for now. NCR. NCR with a single 2 train. See where they want to go. Upgrading his home. And running for 200. He has secured a token in Karakai, which is this offboard here. Doesn't seem like a Real high value token. Should be fairly easy to bypass that. Maybe he's looking towards this oil commodity, and if oil has to be delivered up here in Lahore, maybe he has secured that for himself. Hard to say without looking at the map. Running for 200 pays it out, and we'll have to sell a train, but should be able to pick up a better train here. Don't see a reason why he wouldn't. So he picks up the 4E. Also going to be ignoring all these dits that are on the run, but should be able to run from Lahore to Mumbai, which will be very nice revenue for him in the future as the $60 Delhi city is going to be added to both of these revenues. So should have a nice route for himself. EIR, first run for him. He upgrades his home and is not placing any tokens. So his 3 run is going to be down here to Chennai, it looks like. And he runs for just 130 and pays it out. KGF, first run of a 4E that we're going to see, and I expect him to lay over to Chennai and run for quite a good value. The question is, does he token there? Probably not. It would hurt his EIR company, and it's not under attack from any of the other companies as a result of this Mumbai token. So shouldn't feel under the gun to token, and would have cash to do it if he wanted. So he's going to be running. He's actually tokening in Chennai. So he does lay the token. Okay. Not great news for his other company, I wouldn't say. We'll see how he wants to come back from that. And his run is going to be for 320 as a result of his 4E train, which is running all the way up to Kolkata. And he pays that out. So just looking at the revenue of the companies for a moment, the NWR is leading the pack, but may be falling behind now that these other companies have better trains. KGF is narrowly in second place behind the PNS, and the rest of the companies are trailing by a fairly significant margin. So, looking at net worth, Frank is off to a fairly early lead here, up by 600 on the next closest player. He has the most shares, which is not surprising for the lead player. And last place is currently occupied by Achillean. The NCR with a 4E is going to be running a lot better, but he's got a decent share deficit on Frank and Deroge, so it may be hard for him to come back. Sad Night running the NWR, but only a 30% presidency, which is going to limit the amount of benefit to him, and then stuck with this MR company, which is really floundering. So rough spot for him. We'll see how this develops. Again, the players can be selling shares. Achillean may really want to consider selling this EIR share. Not sure why he held it last time. Its run potential is limited now that it's been tokened out, and it just has a 3 train. So probably should consider selling that. Frank, heavily invested in the KGF, and the KGF is quite good. Actually running for more than his PNS. I don't think that he should be worried about a dump. So maybe not selling anything for him. Sad Night, he has the MWR and the MR. Not a whole lot for him to sell either. I don't know that he wants to sell the MR, even though it's not the most exciting company for him. And then Deroge, probably no sales for him either. So may just see Achillean sell out of the EIR. He's passing again. Not sure why he's holding that share. Would be curious to hear from him on that. Frank passing, Sad Night. He sells an MR, so down to a bare presidency. And Deroge is passing as well. So Sad Night just repositioning his portfolio a little bit. I don't think anybody's going to be eager to steal that MR, so probably safe to run it as a bare presidency. Gives him a little bit more cash for better shares. We're into buying. Achillean is buying the NCR. He buys it from his hand, doubling down on his company. Will have better runs with the 4E, but maybe had some better options. Let's see. The NWR. Yeah, I think I would be looking at that rather than this NCR. It is expensive. It's actually only $10 more since it's come from the IPO or player hands. So a little bit surprised that we don't see that. Regardless, he decides to go for the NCR. Frank, he is also buying the NCR. Okay. And Sad Night is buying the director of the NWR. He was already the president of that, so he's just further capitalizing it, and that would be a good way to get a better train. Now he sells his two train. So something we neglected to think about was just getting money into the companies by buying additional shares. Desroges, he is buying the EIR, so he's a believer in this company. I've been a little bit skeptical of its prospects, but he sees something I don't, and he buys two shares actually, three shares. So he's going to be passing and should be able to leap ahead in priority as a result. Frank, uh, so it looks like maybe everybody just passed there. Frank bought a NWR and a BR, and then everybody else passed. So the BR has floated. That's the new company on the map. And in terms of where that is, it is the purple company, which is, I'm not sure why its token is not on the map. I think the BR has the opportunity to pick its home location. So he can pick one of these two holes. They are, of course, equivalent because Mumbai has been tokened, but I think he had the option of picking this hole if it wasn't already occupied. So he's picking his home city, and we are back into the stock round. Everybody else is passing, and Frank is continuing to capitalize the BR. I worry about this. The map is starting to fill up in terms of tokens, um, so it may have been better to buy paying shares in other players' companies rather than putting your cash into a company that is going to struggle to develop routes. Realistically speaking, where's the BR going to head? Gauge change here may not be entirely relevant if he's able to pick up a 4E train, but then he's going to have to upgrade into this track here, and he's tokened out at Delhi and Karakai and at K14. Alternatively, could head south where there's an open city in Kochi, um, but that's at least 6 track lays away, and the revenue down there is not amazing, especially with a token as Chennai. So, yeah, I question the BR float. In terms of other options he had, looks like he didn't have a whole lot of options. Could have went into the IPO, and since the other players are out of cash, would have been safe to do that and start uncovering shares. Um, so particularly in IPO 3, could have bought the Gipper, NCR, and NWR. All those would be paying shares. All of them are fairly good paying shares, so maybe that would have been something to think about. Regardless, he's floating the Bombay Railway. We are into the next operating round, and the NWR is up. Does have a lot more cash than it, I believe, used to as a result of share purchases from Sad Night. So should be picking up a better train and trading in its two. He is laying out of K14 to get into Kolkata, it looks like. There are some gauge changes there, but when he has a 4E train, that will not matter. Running for 390, very nice revenue. And does he sell his two? Looks like he does. 600 bucks. Probably will be picking up a 4E, I would have to assume. He does. And looks like that was the last train of that rank. So we will be into the multiplying trains, and we'll talk about them as they become available. NWR is selling a share in the MR, no longer a believer in that company, and can reinvest his money somewhere else if he wants. Looks like he buys a BR, which is an interesting choice because obviously it's not going to be running in this operating round, and we've already criticized its long-term potential. PNS running just a 3 train. He is upgrading a DIT, or not a DIT, a regular track, maybe hoping to run through Mumbai in the future. Uh, and in fact, that is where his other company is. So I think he's opening up a run into Delhi for his BR with this track lay. He's running just a 310 for 3 train for 310. Despite not having two trains like these other companies, he still has pretty decent revenue. This will be enough for a double jump, but he needs to find a way to get a better train. He's going to rapidly fall behind in revenue in the next operating round without that. He pays it out and doesn't sell a train, so he's in a little bit of danger of falling behind. He's selling his NWR, does have a good amount of cash as a result, but boy, it must be painful to sell that NWR since it's running so good and it's double jumping. Well, this will give him enough cash in the next operating round for a better train once he trades in his 3. MR is up. MR Looks like he's just upgrading H25 for a little extra money and running a 3 train for 150. So again, not the best revenue for this company. And he is similar to the PNS in desperate need of a better train, but he has much more limited options in terms of actually getting one. NCR running a 4E train. Track is getting pretty mature now. We're starting to see more and more brown and gray tiles. Looks like he is looking to complete a link up into Lahore along the left side of the map, and that oil commodity is still unclaimed. Um, I will note that he has access to this opium commodity, and I believe opium is a $100 bonus, which is the highest in the game. So if he has access to an offboard where that opium can be shipped, he should certainly be taking advantage of that with his E-train, and I think we will probably see that happen. So he does deliver the opium concession, locks that down for the rest of the game, and as a result, with a single train is running for 450, which is going to be enough for, I think, a triple jump. 4 steps, actually. It's enough for a quadruple jump. Wow. That is a huge benefit to him as the 60% owner of that company. And that's the power of those E-trains. They just tear the map wide open in terms of their runs. KGF is up, running a 2 and a 4E. Um, and we missed this, but NCR actually bought a private railroad bond. This is something that will eventually potentially be converted to a Gipper share. So maybe you're preparing for that eventuality. KGF looks like he's not he actually upgraded K14 to gray, but has no tokens to take advantage of it. Maybe doing this for his other presidency, the EIR, who does have token money. So that's going to be the long-term potential for the EIR. He's going to be running out of K14. He's running for 340 with 2 trains. So falling a little bit behind finally in actually 530, never mind. Running great still. And he withholds that, and by trading in a 2, should have enough to secure the first 3 times 2. 3 times 2 means it hits 3 stops and then doubles their revenues, which is pretty powerful. And this train does count DITs. He rusts the warrants, which is bad news for those presidencies, and we are off to the races in terms of these trains. He's got 2 excellent trains. EIR is up, expect a quick token in K14. Now that the later phases of the game have developed, he's actually able to remove some of these gauge change markers, which is going to make his train a little bit more powerful. It looks like he removed the gauge change right here. So with the 3 train, he's able to run from Chennai into this K14 track. Expect we'll see a token there. He does. Runs a 3+2 for 200. And I imagine we'll be trading this in for a better train if he can afford it, but he's going to be a little bit shy. So he'll have to withhold or buy another share to get a better train in this company. He actually buys the train over from the KGF. Okay. And he is a 60% investment in this company. The KGF, he only has 50%, and Frank is splitting his revenue. So it makes sense to withhold, buy the train in the KGF, and then shuffle it over. The IR track, now that it has a token in the middle of the map, is going to be a lot better. So he's playing that pretty smart. BR, trainless, kind of limited potential here. Going to get a run into Delhi, it looks like, but not much else. He is able to buy a 2 train from the discard since these trains don't rust, and I think he's going to come to regret this company float. We are into 3.2. NWR is up, and he is upgrading Kolkata and running a 3 and a 4E. He was able to deliver a new commodity. So 3 companies now. Actually, sorry, I think that's the same commodity we've been seeing for a while. Regardless, running for 600, and he pays that out. He is not taking any stock actions, and we are onto the PNS. PNS needs to find a way to get a better train. Looks like they paid out last time and sold a share, but because the trains have been advanced, even selling that 3 train is not going to be enough for a better train. So when we talk about the train rush in 18 India, I think this is what we're talking about. He has been basically priced out of the higher trains, he's going to have to withhold here and then sell the 3 to get something better. Upgrading into green, running a 3 train for just 310, 340. He withholds that, and we will see him sell this 3 for a better train. He picks up the 3 times 3, so this hits 3 stops and triples them. Probably going to be Lahore, Delhi, and Karakai, if I had to guess. NCR is now up, running a 4E, and he is laying track out of Mumbai here. Looks like he's heading down potentially to the offboard in Kochi, running a 4E, and he is able to deliver opium. I thought that we had seen that happen. Maybe there was another commodity, or maybe I'm just misremembering. But regardless, has $470 run. He withholds that and looks like he's going to be going for a second high value train. Don't know that he wants to sell the 4E, probably looking to hold on to that and then withhold once more for a 4E times 2 or 4E times 3. But he does sell it. Okay, so he's up to $800, which is going to give him a 3 times 2. Hard for me to predict if that's actually going to increase his revenue or not. We will just have to look back next time he runs. I think I misread that. So he's picking up a 4E times 2, so that will certainly increase his run. Okay. We are on to the MR, kind of the black sheep of this group of companies, not running for all that much. He's able to remove a gauge change, runs a 3 chain for 190, pays it out, and is just kind of spiraling. EIR, this company has been running not that great, but has been shuffled some new assets from his fellow company, the KGF. He is able to remove a gauge change, and let's see what his route looks like. He's running all over the map from that central K14 track, and he has a run of 730. Wow. So that'll be certainly a quadruple jump for him, and he pays it out. KGF running for a lot less now that it has a single train, but should still have decent revenue since it's a 4E and he has decent track. He is laying a upgrade here and running for just 290. But again, he is a split presidency with his competitor Frank, so probably not sweating that since his other company ran so well. He buys a 2 train, so probably just going to be running the trains that he has and waiting for his competitors to sell out of the company before he tries to make that run any better. BR, first operation or first run for this company. He is laying track down south and looking to eventually upgrade that DIT, I'm sure. But for now, going to be running just a 2 train from his offboard to Delhi. So will be actually not a terrible run for a 2 train, but compared to these companies that are running for 700, pretty underwhelming. Pays it out, and we are into stock round 4. Players will be selling assets that they no longer want. Achillian, I've been talking about selling this EIR share for a while, but he's held on to it, and boy, it has paid off. So I don't imagine he's going to sell it now after holding on to it. And wow, I am immediately proven wrong. So as soon as the company actually becomes worth something, he sells. Okay, well, hard to predict that. Sad Night's up and passing Deroge probably. Well, I don't think he's going to sell anything here. In theory, could I guess dump the KGF, but it's not so bad that that's probably worth doing. Frank, on the other hand, may want to consider selling out of the KGF and putting his money elsewhere. Just depends on where he thinks he can invest it. I imagine these players are going to be blowing through these Gipper shares and opening up the IPO in this market, in this operating round. Otherwise, there's really just not a whole lot for them to buy. They need access to the IPO shares. So Frank passes, and we are into buying Achillian. He buys the Gipper and is now managing this company. Has not quite floated yet, but again, I think these shares are going to be bought because there's not enough places for players to put their money. Looks like he is doubling down and is looking to actually run the Gipper. Sad Night buys the PNS from the draft, and he looks to have more in his hand than the other players, so he could actually buy another PNS. PNS with a 3 times 3 is going to run pretty well. maybe reasonable to just buy all those up front. Gipper is now floated, and Gipper is going to be choosing where to put his token. Unfortunately, token options are a little bit limited. Um, Probably is going to be looking down here in the south since the north is pretty much occupied. Looks like they chose Mumbai, which is where the BR is. So BR and Gipper are going to be sharing that offboard. Deroge looks like he did open up the IPO by buying a Gipper share. So I don't think that he cares much about the Gipper. I think he just wanted to get access to this NCR share. NCR running a 4E times 2 with a central location will be running quite well. So as expected, he picks that up, and that opens up this row of the IPO to the other players. Frank may be looking towards that NWR share that's just been uncovered. He does pick that up. Don't imagine he wants the French private, so may just hold there. Akelian, he buys the Gipper, again, opening up the IPO. Interestingly, he is opening up the CGR share, which really, who cares about that? The company is not even in play. So maybe just interested in actually running the Gipper. Sad Night, able to pick up an NWR that was in the market. Not sure how that came about. That was a very expensive share at 255. Deroge, he is continuing to open up the IPO, so has bought another Gipper share and will pick up an MR as a result. Of all the companies to open up, the MR is not one that I would be prioritizing, so that is kind of rough for him. Frank, buying a railroad bond, again, that will eventually convert to the Gipper, and for now is just some revenue. Looks like the other players are picking up those railroad bonds as well. Sad Night picking up another expensive share from the market. So I think he's picked up 2 market shares now and paid quite a premium to do that. But with the payouts being what they are, if these companies double and triple jump or quadruple jump again, may well be worthwhile. Deroge, he is buying the CGR, and I think he's just doing that to get an EIR share. Looks like it. And then Frank buying the PNS, which is a paying share. Just going back for a second, it looks like there were 2 PNS shares in a row that were just left available to him, which is surprising. Is that what? Oh, I see. So Darrow's just uncovered that for him. So that's a little bit of the counterplay or interplay that we've been talking about in the stock round, where yeah, there's a share that's really valuable for you, but you got to look at what you're giving the other players. So Frank gets 2 quite good shares in his own company as a result of Darrow's action. Kellyan running out of cash here. He buys an NWR from the hand, and actually 2 from his hand, so he's out of cash. Sad Night is passed, and I think he has first in priority now. He does. Deroge, probably last purchase from him, buys the KGF from the hand, and Frank buys an MR. He still has a little bit of cash, so it looks like he'll be going last, and priority is falling to Sad Night. Looking at player state here, Frank is narrowly in the lead. Deroche has managed to catch up a fair amount and is running 2 companies with 2 trains, has pretty good routes for both of them, so he's definitely a contender. I think this is a consequence of floating this BR. The BR is really not doing a whole lot for Frank, and he invested a lot of cash in it rather than in other paying shares. So he's got to make that work for him, or else he's going to lose this game to Deroche. Akelian and Sad Night much further behind. Akelian has a good position on the NCR now. He struggled in the early game, but has managed to rehabilitate that, and now is going to be running the Gipper. I fear for the Gipper, just as I do for the BR, these late floats may struggle to develop routes. He will be able to shuffle this Gipper money into the NCR for better trains, and maybe that's what he's hoping to accomplish. And then finally, Sad Night, NWR, and the MR. The MR is just a albatross around his neck, and the NWR is a pretty good company, but I don't know if he's going to be able to overcome that MR eaten into his portfolio. NWR is up. Looks like he is laying track into Kolkata and running for 750. Pretty monstrous. Should be a double jump for him. He sells a 3 train and is going to pick up a better train as a result. So he picks up a 4 times 2. Okay, so he's going to be able to take advantage of the dits with the 4 times 2 and then just hit all the high value cities with the 4E. EIR is up, should have a pretty darn good run. Let's see what track he wants to lay. So he's laying through Nepal, it looks like, maybe hoping to bypass Delhi and get into Lahore later in the game with a long train. And he's going to link up with Delhi for now. Okay, so has 2 runs into Delhi. It's a 60 value city, worthwhile. And he actually tokens in Nepal to cut that run for everybody else. Okay. Running 2 trains for 770, and he withholds it. So he's going to sell 3 here and pick up one of these super valuable times 3 trains probably. Yep, 4E times 3. So best train in the game. Hits the 4 highest revenue centers on your route and triples the result. So he's going to have a monstrous run there. And he actually sells a 3 times 2 rather than a 3 train. I guess he needed the cash to afford that expensive train, but I'm sure he'd much rather have a 3 times 2 than a 3. EIR is able to pick up a market share, and again, this is a paying share into the company, gets him a little extra cash, and as it accumulates worth, will increase his personal value at the end of the game by 10% of its value. PNS running a 3x3, upgrading out of Delhi, running for 1020. That is incredible with a 3x3. May want to think about withholding and picking up a better train here. It is tempting to pay it out, of course, because he is 80% of the company. Does he have a way to shuffle a better train in this company? Maybe the BR. So maybe that's what his strategy is. Just withhold on the BR for trains and just leap ahead on this PNS with quadruple jumps. So he's able to quadruple jump. Let's just look at the market here. PNS, yeah. So he's running way ahead here as a result of that quadruple jump. Pays out 1020. He gets 80% of that. That's huge. He buys a 3 train from the discard. May want to shuffle that over to the BCR or the BR and get some more cash for a better train, but running the 3 train for now is not unreasonable. NCR 4E times 2 should also have a massive run. He is laying track just south of K14, and he's able to deliver opium. Running for 760, withholds it and should be picking up a better train. Looks like probably a 4E times 2. So he already has that, so he picks up a 4. All right. The NCR looks like I accidentally skipped through some of their run, but he is able to buy a Gipper share by converting a bond. Gipper is going to be operating soon. The MR is up, is able to upgrade Calcutta to a 3-hull city, which will improve his run a little bit. May want to secure that token, although the odds of him being tokened out seems kind of low at this point. But he does. Running just a 3 for 190, pays that out, and sells the train. Should be picking up a train from the discard, it looks like. Actually, just going to pick up a 2, but is able to pick up 2 trains. So missed a route in mind that's going to increase his run with that. Interesting strategy. KGF is up. KGF is laying track into Mumbai, it looks like, so he can bypass Kochi. And has a 4E train running for just 450. Again, smart move from him. He's shuffling his better trains and better token into the EIR, which he has a much higher percentage of compared to Frank. He withholds, probably selling this 2 train and then pick up the better train. So he buys a 3 times 2, has pretty good trains in both of his companies now. And we are seeing the first operation of the Gipper. This company has a ton of cash and is unfortunately going to be only lacking in runs, it looks like. So laying north, maybe hoping to bypass the tokens in Mumbai to get into K14 or Kolkata. Hard to say. We'll see how that track develops. Running for 700. So, sorry, buying a train for 700, not running for 700. We'll have to see in the next operation what he runs for. BR just running a two train. I imagine we'll see this company continue to withhold and shuffle money into his other company for better trains. Running for 200, he actually pays it out. So maybe I'm misreading that strategy. I do worry about Frank. He has a company that's running for a ton, but this BR is occupying two certificates against his limit and is really not paying for very much. Into 4.2, let's just look at the bank here with these $1,000 runs. This is not going to last long. So $5,000 in the bank. We're not going to see it break in this operation, but may well see it break in the operation of 5.2. So probably not much life left in this game. Players got to really keep that in mind and get as much cash as they can as soon as possible. NWR is laying into DACA and running 4 trains for 1150, pays it out, and that is good for a triple jump. We see the PNS now. PNS is upgrading this track. Seems kind of random. Running 3 trains for 1270. So despite having 3 trains instead of 4 trains, is maybe able to manage a higher run by a good margin. And he is quadruple jumping again. I believe he's done that twice in a row now, which is pretty monstrous. EIR, we've seen some gargantuan runs from this company as well. Looks like he's not doing a whole lot in terms of track. And he's going to be running for 1060, which he pays out. So that's also a quadruple jump. The MR is now up just 2 trains, and he ran for 190 last time with a 3 train. Looks like he's able to almost double that run this time with 2 trains, so definitely the right move. His runs are interesting. So he's able to hit a 60 value city and run into an offboard with both of his trains, and that's why he's running so well. So incremental progress for him. Not the most impressive run compared to these $1,200 runs, but a whole lot better than 190. The MR has bought a share in the KGR and actually floated a company in the operating room. So that is interesting. KGR, let's just look at that, is the purple company, and their token got dropped down here. So that doesn't block anybody's runs and probably is not going to have a huge impact in this game. NCR running 4 trains for 1170, pays it out and quadruple jumps. KGF is Desroches' company. Doesn't look like he's doing a whole lot with track, but is able to put a run of 970 together. So this is the company that he looted for better trains to put in the EIR, and he's still managing almost $1,000 in it. That's pretty good. He withholds, interestingly, is going to sell a train and I imagine going to pick up a 4E by 3. He does. So his runs are going to be huge in this company. But again, he's competing with Frank for the win here, I think. And Frank has half as much of the company as he does. So not going to be easy to pull way ahead, even with monstrous runs here. Gipper, first run for this company, 3 by 2. And looks like he's not doing much with track. Runs his 3 by 2 for 700. So actually a better run than I was anticipating by getting into Delhi and then 2 offboards. BR running just a 2 train, not laying any track, and he's still paying out for 200. We are into our stock round, and I anticipate this being our final stock round. Actually, the bank almost broke there, so it was much closer than I was anticipating. And in fact, if we did not see a train be bought, maybe it would have. I haven't done the math. Probably not, but it would have been a little bit closer. Looking at the game state into our last stock round and set of operating rounds, looks like Frank actually has opened up a pretty substantial lead, despite the poor runs of the BR. And looking at that, it's a result of the massive stock value of his PNS, which he owns 80% of, and his close competitor owns 0 of, along with the massive revenue or runs from this company. Frank also has investment in the highest value company, the NWR, which also has good runs. And Desroches has investments in the EIR and KGF. The KGF stock value is very poor. So I think that's why he's falling behind. has had to withhold a little bit too much. The third and fourth place players are Sad Knight and Achillean. Achillean struggled in the early game with the NCR, was able to rehabilitate that and has good runs now, but then went back for the Gipper, which fell back, has underwhelming stock value, and its runs are okay. And then finally, Sad Knight. NWR has been a good company throughout the game, continues to be so, but he only owns 60% of it compared to the 20% from Frank. And this MR has struggled throughout the game, so that's why he's in third place. Looking at shares that are available, um, the NCR is available, so should be seeing Sad Knight snap that up, I imagine. And then looks like there's nothing in the market, so it'll just come down to what players have in their hands. Sad Knight in particular doesn't have much that's exciting. And actually, Sad Knight's going to get the NCR and the EIR, two very good shares. It doesn't open up anything of significance for a Kellyan. So that's good that he has priority there. Don't imagine we'll see too many sales here unless somebody wants to sell out of the CGR. A little bit confused why that company ended up floating. Darroch does sell that share as expected. And Frank sells a BR. Again, I have been questioning the float of this company. I'm not sure of the logic there, but he is in first place, so can't criticize him too much. He also sells an MR, that makes sense. And Sad Knight goes for those two paying shares we identified in the IPO. And looking at the other IPOs, it's going to be hard for players to get down to the better shares. There's an NCR share, but there's two shares in front of it that are pretty underwhelming. Kellyan is converting railroad bonds to a Gipper, so he's able to get a share without opening up anything for Darroch. Darroch does the same. Frank does the same. And I think we're seeing the power of these railroad bonds now. Sad Knight, going back to the IPO, has to buy an MR, which I'm sure he's not excited about. And this gives him a Gipper share, which is better. Looking at the cert limit, he is actually not anywhere close, and Frank and Darroch are only two shares away, so they will both hit their cert limits. Kellyan buying a railroad bond, Darroch doing the same, Frank doing the same. So everybody's snapping up these Gipper shares because they're pretty good and they don't open up opportunities for the other players. So everybody is just exhausting these railroad bonds and then converting them into shares. Darroch actually had a Gipper tucked away in his hand and is able to take care of that. And looks like everybody's focused on the Gipper for now. Kellyan is passing first to pass, probably not a whole lot of opportunities for him, it looks like. Nowhere near his cert limit, so unfortunate for him that he's not able to take advantage of any of the IPO shares or anything. Darroch buying a KGF that he still had in his hand. Again, this is a pretty good revenue, so it makes sense. Frank still converting railroad bonds. Sad Knight buying an MR from the draft. Looks like everybody's pretty much passing. Sad Knight having to go back for the BR, so he's kind of dumpster diving, just taking shares that he can get access to. He does manage to buy a Gipper. Does this open anything up in the IPO? Doesn't look like it. Oh, actually, there's an NCR share, so he's going to snap that up probably. No. Was he at his cert limit? Doesn't look like it. So a little bit surprised that he sits on $1,000 of cash. All right. Well, we are into our final operating round, and in terms of track, I don't know that there's a whole lot of development left in the game just because there's tokens all over the place. There are tokens left in the NWR, but he doesn't have cash. I don't know that it makes sense to withhold to drop a token. Same story for the PNS. The BR could, in theory, drop a token somewhere, but I don't think he has the ability to get anywhere interesting with his track development. He's tokened out pretty much everywhere. I suppose could lay track through this or and then token in Kolkata, but Kolkata has already been bypassed, so really wouldn't be the end of the world there. And CGR is active, but has no track developed for it and no player to operate it, so those tokens are relevant. Gipper has a ton of tokens, could see those come out. NCR has tokens available as well. So I guess Looking at the players, Frank has a $1,900 lead or $1,500 lead, and the runs are enough that I think we have to just kind of look at this first operating round and see if there's anything exciting that happens that could cost him the game. NWR is laying track just outside of Lahore, bypassing that. Runs 2 4 trains for $1,200 and pays it out. Bank is broken, so we will be in our last set of operating rounds here. He's able to triple jump. PNS running 2 3 trains, not laying any track. Runs for 1270, similar revenue. Pays it out. EIR, he is also neglecting to run track, lay track. Runs for 1060. Not going to be coming back with that. And he's able to sell a share. And interesting, he buys a BR share. So didn't want the CGR, which is not going to be running, is going to just buy a paying share here, since that will count towards endgame score. NCR, not laying any track, running for 1240, pays it out, and not doing anything with shares. MR is able to remove a gauge change and increase his run. Actually not, still running for 370, pays it out. Gipper, not laying any track, not laying any tokens, running for 700 still. He's able to upgrade to a 4 times 3. So Akelian has 50% and everybody else has 30%. Akelian is the player in a pretty distant last place, so no change in the relative order of the players from this. BR, kind of an irrelevant company, running for 200, not able to lay a token anywhere significant. KGF, running for 1280, so up there with the leaders in terms of revenue, able to quadruple jump. He was able to get an extra share of this compared to Frank, so that could potentially change the outcome, but I think it's going to be too little too late. And then the CGR, somehow this company came into existence. I wasn't paying close enough attention. Looks like he's not going to lay any track, and it's just going to fall back. So 5.1, game is over, and Frank takes it by over or around $2,000, closely followed by Deroge. Sad Night, very close behind Deroge, and Achillean bringing up the rear. So Frank was in the lead for a long time in this game, had some nice competition from Deroge. Sad Night and Achillean were struggling for a good portion of the game. Frank was running the PNS, one of the companies we identified at the start as being very strong because of its operation in the Northwest. But interestingly, the KGF down here in the South ended up being a real contender, and Deroche was able to have some interesting shenanigans with closing the DHR, starting the EIR, shuffling trains around, and was able to make it an interesting game despite being relatively locked out of the Northwest for the entire game. So well played for him. He kept the game relatively close. Well played to all the players. And I think I'll just give you kind of my thoughts about 18 India at this point, having hopefully remained neutral for most of the video up until now. So as noted at the start of this video, 18 India is a pretty unique take on the 18XX system and departs from a lot of prior titles in very important ways. And while I see the value in innovation, I do question innovation for innovation's sake. I'd like to see valuable additions rather than just additions to be different. And in my opinion, the changes made in 18 India are not things I enjoy. So I do not enjoy this game. I will go through the cons and then some pros, and just in my mind, the cons of this design really outweigh the pros for me. So con number one is that I just think there's too much Chrome in this game. The rule set is too complicated for me. I don't think it's a clean rule set, something like 1830 or 1889, very clean, easy to understand, and just moves very smoothly. The designated routes, the and I actually didn't even talk about the designated routes in the video, but there are route bonuses that you can get from running a train to one tile from another that get added to your run, just like a commodity bonus does. So you have designated routes, you have commodity bonuses, you have these crazy E trains that are running all over the map. It just makes the game very difficult to calculate, and I think it's just not worthwhile. So that's con number one to me. Con number two to me is the initial share selection. Um, in terms of being dealt a number of shares, having to pick the ones that you predict being value, and then drafting the remainder, it just takes a long time. The start of this game is slow. It's just kind of tedious from my perspective. You have to look at your hand, look at the IPO, calculate how many shares are in other players' hands to determine whether or not it's worth to keep a share, whether or not you're going to be able to defend that particular company. I can see some players really enjoying that, but it's just something that I can't get into, and it's a really slow way to start the game as opposed to a more traditional just waterfall action. Con number three, and this goes back to the draft and the start of the game, is that we're introducing hidden information into 18xx. I've never once played an 18xx game and said, "Oh boy, I wish there was a hidden element to this game." So I really don't understand the decision to incorporate that into the game. I don't like it. I'm sure that other players feel very differently. Maybe they value that, but that is really a brutal component of this game for me. Some of the information is hidden and trackable, which is even worse. So you have to remember which of the shares your opponents have drafted in the past to make meaningful decisions in this game. So it's just, truly hidden information in terms of the initial distribution of assets, and then hidden trackable information, just even worse. I can't get behind that change. Con number four for me is that the stock round in this game, after the initial setup, has really been, in my mind, neutered. All the players have to sell in sequence and then can never sell again. There's really no manipulation of stock price as a result. Stock prices don't change at all, really. And then in terms of options to buy, you're artificially limited because you have this IPO tableau. You can't buy the shares that you want. You have to go through the fixed order of IPO shares. I understand, again, that for some players that's a feature, not a bug, but for me, that is intolerable. I hate when games limit your options. I always go back to the 18 mex example where you can only buy a single train per operating round. It doesn't make any sense to me. I just am not a fan of that. Again, these are my personal opinions, but I'm just being very honest. Um, Con number four, it feels to me like the map starts in the game being fairly open. It does close down a little bit, as we saw later in the game with some of these companies floating, but with the companies being able to upgrade tiles independent of the train roster, you can rush into a three-hole city, in operating round two, or, operating around 3.1 and have three holes. It just is hard to token companies out early in the game. I'm not a huge fan of that. The quad lay of tracks is, an interesting component of this game. It opens the map up. It also is a large map, so you kind of need the ability to do that, or else the game would be extremely slow. So that may be more of a plus or minus as opposed to a con, but it's not something that I particularly value. Um, Point number six, this kind of goes back to point number one where I was talking about Chrome. Calculating the revenues in this game are just it's terrible. It's just absolutely tedious. You're counting your revenue centers like normal, but now you have to triple it or double it, and then you have to look back and see, did you hit a destination bonus? Did you deliver a commodity? Those aren't doubled. The rules for whether or not a commodity is delivered and included in your run versus whether or not you hit a destination run varies. It's just a lot to remember. It really slows down a point of the game, route calculation and revenue calculation. That should be really quick. Makes it really tedious for me. I can't stand it. The example of this is that the E trains do not need to count the endpoints of the designated route to get the bonus, but you do need to count commodity locations to get that bonus. So just keeping that in mind, remembering that throughout the game while you're doing this, which is, route calculation should be second nature. I don't need all this extra stuff in a game to be enjoyable. Um, Something that kind of annoys me, and this is a very minor nitpick, so please don't count this with some of these other criticisms, is that the fact that you can run a train through both cities on a double O tile and have them count for revenue, but you can't do that for Nepal, which looks to me just like a double O offboard, or Mumbai, which is similar. It just seems like an unnecessary, gotcha rule for new players. Um, I don't understand that. Something I don't like about this game, but I think that some players do, and I see the value behind it is the unique take on the train rush. So as noted in the playthrough, there is no rusting. You can salvage trains to buy the next rank, and that is a way to engineer a train rush. Certainly, I like the threat of rusting trains and bankruptcy much more than I like this kind of softer approach. I also think it's strange that you can sell your train and then immediately put that cash towards a new train. Most of the time in 18xx, when you take an action, you have to pay a price in terms of an opportunity cost to take that action. So, you have to buy a share and hold it before you can sell it in some games, and that opens you up to the risk of a dump. Or in order to buy a train, you have to withhold the operating round before, or you have to issue a share in the operating room before you get access to that money. So the fact that you can immediately access the money you get from selling a share back or a train back is an interesting decision. It may break the game if you weren't able to do that. It may slow it down too much. I'm not a designer. I can't say that, but I don't like that aspect of this design. My last con of this game is a very minor con. It's very petty, but I hate the private names in this game. They are so repetitive, and you have to imagine that there would have been, more interesting names for the privates, and frankly, more interesting private abilities. The private abilities all seem very similar. They can be consequential, as we saw in this game early on, but they are not very interesting privates compared to a lot of 18xx games. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit more done there. So I've really, I guess, been harsh on this game. It's not a game that I particularly like, and I want to balance some of those cons by some of the pros. I don't have as many pros, obviously, or else I would like the game. But the first pro is that the pass order priority is, I think, a breath of fresh air. I really like to see that as opposed to the more standard left of last action, which is kind of a arbitrary way of doing priority. I don't think it's a particularly valuable mechanic. It's very predictable, but it's leads to a lot of kind of lack of player agency in determining where they end up in priority, which is undesirable in my mind. Um, I don't think that lumping the selling of all the shares in the first phase of the operating round does this priority mechanism any favors. I think it kind of works against that. Um, and that, along with allowing players to buy multiple shares from their hand as one action, makes it kind of easy, I think, for players to pass quickly, which to some extent takes away the downside or the tension between deciding to take an action or pass for priority. So I think that is something that works against this otherwise good mechanism that I like in the game. My other pro is that the track in this game is a little bit interesting, and I don't mean the track laying, I mean the actual tiles themselves. So the fact that you have triple dits, the fact that dits can upgrade in this game, and they can actually upgrade into cities. That's something that we didn't talk about in the video. Is, I think, very interesting. I like the idea of the gauge changes and how you can remove them in later games. So I think that's all good and something that adds value to the design. So those are my pros. And then I have at the end of the game, or at the end of this discussion, kind of a plus or minus. So something that I'm not sure if I like or not. I would have to play more and think about more to kind of decide. And that's the investments or assets of companies counting towards your your personal treasury at the end of the game. So that's a huge rule breaker for 18 India compared to other 18xx's, where there's a very sharp delineation between player assets and company assets, and company assets do not count at all towards endgame score. So this breaks that rule, which is interesting. Um, but the way it does that is that making the game better? I don't know. It certainly makes endgame calculation of score much more tedious and longer because you have to look at the company assets, total them up, calculate 10%, add them to the share value, and then you can calculate your endgame net worth. So it definitely slows that down. Does it add an element to the game that is worthwhile and offsets that additional mental load and time calculating? It might. I would have to play more to think about that and strategize around that to really come up with that. But it's certainly an interesting idea. I just don't know if the way it's implemented is worthwhile. If the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak. So I guess I end this video on a little bit of a negative note, which is unfortunate. I'm not a huge fan of 18 India. I'm glad that it's on 18x games and more players will have a chance to get exposed to it, and draw their own conclusions. And maybe it'll inspire other designers to take some of the parts of this game and rework them into other titles. I think that's always good. But I don't know that I personally will be playing all that much of 18 India, and probably won't be on the channel very much. So thanks for listening to my rant about 18 India, and I hope the video is valuable. And leave me a comment if you think what I said is stupid, and you think 18 India is the best ever, and tell me why. Track Talk will be back. Thanks for watching.